Do you think he's going to do that when you call him un-Canadian for presenting an opposition at this juncture?
He went a little bit far yesterday. I hope he's regretting it. I know he's been ratioed quite badly on his video, which is a suggestion to me that he's not expressing the views of British Columbians.
Why was Vassy so triggered by Danielle Smith calling David Eby un-Canadian? Well, to me and the millions of other hungry, broke people in our country, that's exactly how it seems. If the single obstacle standing in the way of Canadian prosperity is a pathetic little weasel who cares more about giving away free drugs to addicts than allowing that dirty, nasty, sticky oil to go through his province, this dude is 100% un-Canadian. And Danielle Smith breaks down why it's unfair for every other province in Canada to get their own way, but not Alberta, as usual. She even hints around that if this doesn't work, that separation is most certainly on the table. Make sure you hit the like button below the video to help it reach more of you. Comment below. Is it time for Western separation?
You had some very, very, harsh words for him today. You called him un-Canadian in his opposition to this pipeline. Is that not going too far? I mean, can't someone have an opinion that differs than yours on what economic growth looks like in this country and still very much be a Canadian?
Well, I would just ask you to look at his video, which I think stepped over the line.
At a time when it's under direct threat and attack by Donald Trump and those who seek to bring his harmful political project here to Canada. The fictional Alberta bitumen pipeline project achieves literally none of these things. The non-existent Alberta pipeline project would put tens of billions of dollars in real BC projects and jobs at risk. The Alberta Fantasy Bitumen Pipeline, what the Conservatives in Alberta are pushing is an entirely political creation in the lead up to their election for wedge politics at the expense of British Columbia and Canada's economy. As all Canadians feel the impact of Donald Trump's trade war, let's not give in to those who aim to bring his politics here. We are Canadians, and we will choose a better way.
I mean, it is fine to disagree. I try to find ways in which we can find common ground, and we've got lots of common ground. We have a difference of opinion on this, and I do think it's unconstitutional. It has been determined by the courts that these kinds of things, trade and commerce, as well as ports and interprovincial infrastructure, are federal issues. And the reason for that is that we can't have a single parochial province blocking the aspirations of another. That's not how we were supposed to function as a country. So it is the very definition of what Canada is that we work together on these things. And so I was disappointed to hear his comments, but in the end, it's up to Mark Carney to make the decision on that. And so that's why I'm working with the Prime Minister.
And I do understand even characterizing what he said as unconstitutional because of your belief, and I think the Constitution backs it up, that this is federal jurisdiction. But calling him un-Canadian is a very specific way to describe someone who disagrees with you fundamentally on one issue around economic development. Why go that far, and what purpose does it serve?
Well, what's the whole point of why we're having the conversations that we are about tearing down internal trade barriers and finding new markets? It's because we're all facing a threat from our greatest friend and trading partner, the United States, and the instabilities created in that Donald Trump has created in our relationship here. And so we have signed agreements, both among the Western premiers as well as among the national premiers, that will work together to develop economic corridors that include all of the above. It doesn't say we're going to include everything except the products produced in Alberta. It's very obvious to me that the best opportunity that we have to find new markets is in Asia. And the way you get to Asia is you have to get your products to the west coast of British Columbia. And so that's the reason why we've identified that, along with those who are advising us, as the best opportunity for us to be able to develop those markets. And I would hope that he would agree and that he would work with us on it.
Do you think he's going to do that when you call him un-Canadian for presenting an opposition at this juncture?
You know, he began it, and I hope he dials his rhetoric back, because I'll be very frank about what I think of premiers who are trying to block other premiers from getting their products to market. So I would say that I think he went a little bit far yesterday. I hope he's regretting it. I know he's been ratioed quite badly on his video, which is a suggestion to me that he's not expressing the views of British Columbians.
And I do understand, like, he deserves challenges over the rhetoric he's employed. And I found, listening to you in response until today, you weren't matching it in a commensurate way. It sounded like trying to dial things down and, maybe even attempt some sort of conversation. When did that switch and why?
I would just encourage you to listen to his words. And so I calibrate on the basis of that. But the main thing is, this isn't his decision. This is a decision for the Prime Minister. He can maybe express his view all he wants, but he's not the ultimate decision maker. I think the decision making comes down to, does the project make sense for Canada? And it does. And we're going to be able to demonstrate that.
Do you not, though, have some empathy as someone who has so voraciously defended things that you feel are in the province's jurisdiction? If I think back, for example, to you or your predecessor, your Jason Kinney, talking about carbon pricing. Even when the courts determined that that was an issue where the federal government had jurisdiction, you pushed back and said, no, I feel like this is not in the best interests of my province. David Eby, is he not, despite your disagreement with him, entitled to push back on something that he feels is not in the best interest of people who live in his province? And once again, like, why does that make him un-Canadian? It just feels very far.
He's actively trying to block our ability to access the coast. I mean, we have international law. We have international law that says one nation is not allowed to block another. It's absurd that we would have one province blocking access to another. And yes, of course, and that's how I know that it isn't his jurisdiction. The TMX pipeline was challenged by previous premiers, and the courts determined that this is federal jurisdiction for a reason. Because if we're going to operate like a country, then we have to support each other. And I'm not feeling like Premier Eby is doing that right now. I think that if we're all going to be in this together,
isn't he allowed though to consider other interests, right? Like that's what I'm saying. You're ultimately saying it's Mark Carney's decision, it's the Prime Minister's decision. So why isn't David Eby allowed to say, hey, I have these constituencies who don't feel like this is necessary. I do feel like getting rid of the tanker ban will have a negative impact on some of the investments we want to see. Like that. I can envision if the shoes were on another foot, you doing the same thing, expressing the interests of the people of your province as you see them.
No, I've never talked about blockading this Trans-Canada highway, so cart trucks coming in from the BC ports can't get through my province. I've never talked
saying that?
I'm just telling you it's the equivalent.
No,
I'm not talking about blockading the CN-CP rail line so that they can't get to BC. I'm not talking about turning off the gas pipeline that takes 5 BCF a day of BC gas through Alberta into the American markets. The whole point is that we have cross-border infrastructure that we all benefit from, and we have to make sure that we maintain that, because otherwise we aren't a real country. If we can't build cross-border infrastructure and we can't get our products to market, then we're violating what it is that the founders came together to build Canada in the first place.
You said last week when you made the announcement about being a proponent for the initial phase, it's a test of whether Canada works or not. And kind of in the same vein as I'm asking about labeling David Eby as un-Canadian, like, why take it to that level? And ultimately, if you're going to make that kind of threat or ultimatum, like, what happens if you get a no on this? Does that mean that Canada doesn't work? And what does that mean that you do in response?
Well, I can tell you that Albertans are questioning whether Canada works. And I'm not telling anything you don't know. There's a very active group that thinks Canada's broken. And so I suppose I could just go down to the United States and start working with American counterparts to see if we can build more pipelines. They've expressed an interest in restarting the Keystone XL. And I suppose we could maybe sell another 1 million or 2 million barrels a day additional to the United States. But I believed the premiers and I believed the Prime Minister when they said they wanted us to work like a country, that they wanted us to open new markets. And if it doesn't work, then I guess I'll have to work with the United States. But that then is a failure, in my opinion. That's kind of is a failure of the exercise. The whole reason why we've had this recalibration in Canada in the last 8 months is because people are nervous that we are too reliant on the United States. So changing so that we become even more reliant on the United States seems to be a failure.
When you invoke the separatist sentiment, though, are you threatening in the eventuality, or the possibility rather, that this is a no, that you will throw support behind that endeavor? Like, what is it exactly that will happen?
Why would we settle with running nothing but deficits? Why would we settle with the problems that we have at the federal level that even the PBO is warning about is getting very dire? We've got to start finding ways to be able to build things again. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to make sure that Canadians are on board and understand what that looks like, because we can't have the next 10 years be like the last 10 years.
Vassy just couldn't let it go, eh? Like, it really offended her that Smith called Eby un-Canadian. Well, he is, Vassy. David is making choices that directly go against the rest of Canada's interests. A majority of people, including me, are on the side of Danielle Smith and Alberta. Rather than asking Danielle why she characterized Eby with probably the most accurate description thus far, she tried to create a sob story on behalf of him. And Vassy, when you say, well, isn't David Eby allowed to operate on the best interests of his people in British Columbia? Well, flip that around for Alberta. What if Smith decides that what's in the best interest for Alberta is working with the US instead of Canada? Would you still support that, Vash? Doughhead. And if this deal can't get done, if Alberta gets the shaft yet again, I think that this most certainly pushes things much closer to separation. Hell, if it were possible for Alberta to be the 51st state, I'm pretty sure that it would have been done by now.